Anybody follow Patriot Street Fighter in here? How many people follow Patriot? Okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the story if you haven't heard how Patriot Street Fighter came out of the ashes and turned into be the high-octane, full-throttle truth hammer it is. I know there are some people that are afraid of the message. I know there is one individual, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I will. There's one individual who, quote-unquote, was an invited speaker that felt that he would be aligned with people like myself. And made an attempt to call people around the country to not come to this event or other speakers. That's a Patriot Street Fighter right there. That's a woman who will not back down. That's what this Alan and Francine, they understand the meaning of battle. This is a war. The only reason we have lost this war up until this point because people don't understand their spiritual calls to get into the fight. Christianity is an action plan, right? And I've said this from the biggest church stages in this country, and quite frankly, I'm surprised they haven't uninvited me from these events. But the simple fact is, I sat back for 30 years, and I've watched what happened. We've listened to pastors, priests, politicians for all of our lives, and this thing is at the edge of the abyss. This is a message I have to all pastors. If the pastors in this country talk like Patriot Street Fighter, this shit show would come down so fast, even the Satanists would be stunned. That's how you have to fight this battle. We live in a day and age where everybody's worried about what people think of them. You know how well that worked out for me? 1990 was when I started going down the rabbit hole. I worked elective politics for 16 years. Right up until I realized that the machine is corrupt and half of these people are criminals. The biggest accomplishment we have had with Patriot Street Fighter is branding the political class the scumbag class. And I say that with all disrespect. Now, one thing I can tell you is we do have some good players that are working or willing to walk into to Satan's lair. That's elective politics. The defunct corporations now that are masquerading as government, including state governments. But we do have some courageous warriors that are willing to go out there and fight in this fight. And I'll be talking to this gentleman right here about his candidacy for the state senate in Maryland. There's a number of people that I am endorsing. And those people that are too timid and intimidated to fight this war like a soldier would fight it, they don't get on Patriot Street Fighter. They don't come on the channel. I got a list of 1,000 people deep that want to come on Patriot Street Fighter. And it's the honor of my lifetime because honestly, I never saw this thing coming. Never saw it coming. Here's when my world changed. Most of you know I was killed in a catastrophic crash in my Harley Davidson in 2014, laid it into the side of a van at 50 miles an hour. I already knew I was dead. You know, your brain goes very, very fast when you're in a situation that is going to have a conclusion. But somehow, my brain said, try to get the bike down on the ground as quickly as you can to slow it down. So when I did, I got the bike down on its side, and so when it impacted a van at 50 miles an hour, broadside, the underside of the frame hit first. It buckled the van 30 degrees, dead center, destroyed my bike, destroyed me. It's like driving a Harley Davidson off a 10-story building and landing upright. So it blew up through my pelvis like an IED, blew my pelvis off my spine, blew it apart in the front, broke my left femur in 7 places. My left foot counter rotated opposite an ankle sprain until it nearly fully severed. So I ended up with trauma in every area of my body. The only thing that kept me alive was I didn't hit my head. So as I'm laying down on the ground, face down, and I'm not breathing anymore, I'm still conscious, all I can think of is looking to my left. I was able to get my arm was pinned under me, my left arm. I could get my arm up, or my elbow up, and I could flip my goggles off, snap my quick release, my helmet falls down. And I remember looking to the left or the right, and I see this fence, and I'm only 1 minute from my house outside of North Jersey, outside of Manhattan. So I looked at this fence, and I saw 2 guys that were driving a van standing on the curb, just kind of like this, looking down at me, right? And I knew I was gonna die because I wasn't breathing anymore. And I thought, I'm gonna die. And as soon as I had that thought, this wave of peace settled over me because I knew what was next. I wasn't afraid of death. The Satanic Order has very effectively created the fear of death of all of us. My contention is if you believe in the Christ consciousness, if you believe you're here for a spiritual ascension purpose, why are people so afraid of death? They programmed it in us. And what happened with me, everybody's journey is different. I was born again Christian at 14, studied divinity for 20 years. Finally got to the point in 99, I threw God overboard. Literally, looked up and said, "Fork you," that's Patriot Street Fighter language. I'm done, drop the anvil, I'm out. And I went on my own journey. I've been studying epistemology, metaphysics, philosophies, a lot of different disciplines, different religions, and then quantum physics became my new Bible for about 10 or 15 years. So what happens is when I'm now in this state of trauma, you know, I fade to black, resigned, I'm ready to go, everything is absolutely peaceful, somehow I check back in. And then I'm stunned that I'm still alive when you fade back in. I was actually pissed, like, wait a minute, I was ready. You know, like, you're gonna die, Scott. Really? You ready? Oh yeah, well, hold on, I'm ready. Okay, let's go. Psych, I was just kidding. That's kind of the experience in my head. So I end up in this trauma center, and they were fighting to keep me alive. Of course, I remained conscious through that till I went to the first surgery. So they put 6-inch screws in through my pelvis into my spine. They plated me in the front because it blew open so far I could have given birth to a 30-pound baby, right, if I was a woman. I have a plate that holds my whole left femur together. My foot's reattached, ankle's rebuilt with this trapeze system of metal. All the trauma, every organ was in catastrophic failure, basically. So 11 days later, I wake up after they butchered me and put all this metal in my body. It was a nightmare of epic proportions you couldn't possibly fathom. You know, I spent a long time in the world of competitive bodybuilding on a national stage, so I've been beating the life out of my body for a very long time. I was used to pain. I was used to sports injuries. Nothing could describe this, but more so the fear of being trapped in this wrecked hall and you cannot get out. Everything is a matter of your attitude. Because when I came to it after 3 weeks, I got through this horrific trauma and was able to think. I remember my wife at the time was at my bedside 3 weeks after I was pulled out of the grave, expressing her concern about our future because of these catastrophic injuries, right? Is that really the right time to start into that conversation? Yeah. Hence the word ex-wife. So I remember looking over as best I could turn my head, and I said, look, I know how bad this is. And I didn't know because I was paralyzed on the left side. I knew that. My left side was paralyzed. But there was more injuries that were going to reveal themselves to me over time. And I said to her, I said, I know how bad this is. I said, look, I am not going to allow this to be a liability in my life. I'm going to turn this into an asset. I don't know how, but I'm going to turn it into an asset. That was my mindset. How could I have that mindset when I was in this catastrophic situation? Because I had been studying quantum physics and I came to understand the power of God's quantum realm, which is what we're now coming to discover. This is what the Great Awakening is about. Why do you think Christ said, you'll do all these works and even greater works than I? How many people really buy into that? Probably not, hardly any of us. I did, I knew that. Why? The quantum realm is the power we've all been given. It's what we're part of. It's what Christ could understand. It's such a high state of spiritual consciousness. You are made in the likeness and image of your Creator. What does that mean to you? God doesn't create a second-hand operation. It's not what we're about. Patriot Street Fighter becoming this high-octane, full-throttle truth hammer is to be so provocative to wake people up to their individual power. That's what they're afraid of. That's what the Satanists are afraid of. And let me tell you what it is, what happens to your life when you become bold and you step out. I mean, I was described as being too radical and too bold. This is the problem with the mindset of these people, right? Establishment politics is a one-way street into the depths of hell. Prove me wrong, look where we are today. I don't tolerate the political class anymore. I go on full force attack. Why? You didn't do this to the country. I didn't do this to the nation or the world. Who's been calling the shots all of our lives? The political class, and they claim that there's nothing that they can do about it, right? Okay, if you scumbags are so powerless with all of our money, all of our tax dollars, and you have the bully pulpit, I guess I'm gonna have to do this myself. And when they launched, first of all, Donald Trump cleared the path for me. I walked away in 2006, I worked many campaigns, I just run I was a campaign manager for Mark Eisler's state assembly race, worked both Bush campaigns, 2000, 2004. I was tracking my way to one day get to the United States Senate. That was my dream. 16 years I was tracking in a way that I wasn't climbing over the wreckage of the political class so I'd become like Dave Wood. I was gonna hit my home run in a business world, create a profile that way, and then run for the US Senate. That was my dream. Right up until I decided that that would be the greatest disservice I could have for the country, because I would be walking into Satan's lair and they capture everybody. I turned down the opportunity to run for a state assembly seat in California when they asked me, what are you talking about? And I said, not interested. What do you mean? Everybody knows you're trying to get to Washington. I said, yeah. I said, but on my terms. What are your terms? I said, until I create enough wealth so nobody owns me, I will never set foot in that beltway. I don't want to be anywhere near the political class. Because they've effectively reached everybody. It's a capture operation. The curtains came back one day, the sun came in when I watched this guy come down the escalator, and I happened to walk past the TV. I just thought, what's this about? And here comes this guy and his beautiful wife down the escalator, stopped at the bottom, election season 2015, and I started listening to Donald Trump. And I said, because I'm very open and honest, I said, holy shit, there he is. I never saw him coming. Never saw him coming. Grabbed my cell phone, I started texting people around the country, people who work campaigns with me, stop whatever you're doing. You've got to turn the TV on. Here's the next Republican nominee and the landslide president. Then I went to Facebook and I got pummeled because I was supporting Donald Trump. And that was by my Republican friends, because they were all Ted Cruz fans. And I just kept ratcheting it up. And I made the boldest, most provocative predictions, but I could lay out a 10-page dissertation of this is why Donald Trump wins hands down. Of course, we convinced a lot of people before the election wins in a landslide. Donald, if he hadn't want to be tracking you for the rest of my life would have been destroyed. No friends left. But we saw what happened. And then the lunatic asylum opened the doors, and here comes the Trump derangement syndrome army. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I ended up homeless, crippled, and penniless 8 months after that catastrophic crash. Lost my company, lost everything I owned. Somebody started putting pressure on me and wanted to control my whole life and box me in. I had an ultimatum, and this is how much I'll accept tyranny. When I had this ultimatum that I was now going to be controllable, I was in a wheelchair, cramps, chairlifts, all these things in my house, and I got this ultimatum. My answer was, I called the 4Q option, plan B. And I ended up in that situation. A very wonderful man basically saved my life. 8 months later, I was able to get on an airplane. I was out of a wheelchair. I was dragging myself around in Moby Lake crutches. This gentleman, who was a good friend of mine for many years, took me in, had a place to live for free. For the next 4 years, I could drag myself in a gym and go to work every day on this wreckage through horrific pain to make it work. How did I know I could make it work? I understood the power of the Christ consciousness. I could rewire my neural networks in the quantum field and cause this body to find new pathways to be able to walk again. And I stayed on that, just stayed on it. This gentleman, who is so wonderful, saved my life, has full-blown Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, that was an interesting experience. So through the process of this, I learned to walk again. I never took a disability check because I couldn't have that going in my head. So I was hungry for years. I never took a disability check. I learned to walk again. I started working again in the solar industry, designing systems, and I started riding again, right? 5 years later, it took me 5 years, a war every day to get to that point. So here I am, moved over to Dallas from Los Angeles. By the way, I'm a Pennsylvania boy from up here. So I got my life back. I get a beautiful dream, Harley Davidson Twisted Cherry Streetlight Special. 2.5 months, I'm rolling around. That's my church. Every night when I'm done with my live stream, after I clean everything up, I'm on my bike, hour, 2 hours, everything's lit around DFW. So that's my prayer time. That's when I'm connected to God's quantum realm. Smell, sight, sound, everything. So here I am, 2.5 months into this new life, coming back in town, downtown Dallas, went through a major intersection. Texas pickup truck blows through at high speed, takes me out all over again. I'm flying through the air, my bike's underneath me, flying through the air. I'm headed for a curb about 30 feet away, and I'm thinking, I don't think I'm gonna make it out of this one. So I land on my back, however I landed, but I'm always looking for the silver lining. And I remember I'm laying on my back in grass, and I'm like, holy shit, I landed on the only patch of grass in downtown Dallas. Started thinking positive already, but I reached down, I picked up this leg. This plate goes down the outside of my hip and stops right here. Right below it, a clean femur break. They reattached my left foot, and about 4 inches above my ankle right here, it was flopped down 90 degrees, shattered, tibia, fibula, foot's turned in. I thought, well, I'm gonna lose it this time. So I end up in a trauma center. These guys are putting these scans on the screen, full body, checking everything. And I could just see them. I'm over here. Up comes the scans, and they're looking, these two surgeons, they're trauma orthopedic surgeons looking at these scans, and I can see them go. And I was like, I'm in deep, deep. So they come over and talked to me, told them my story. I said, please, just give me a chance, because I knew they were going to take the leg. Give me one more chance. I promise you I'll come back again. So my buddies came in to see me at 2 in the morning. I was with them prior to this happening, and I'm laying there, and they're just like shaking their head, because they're like, you get another Harley Davidson again? I'm like, do you go to church? Of course I'm going to get a Harley Davidson. So my buddy John's looking at me, and I said, well, John, I said, I guess God didn't want just an epic comeback. He wanted a super epic comeback. So we set out on this path with them, and it was a tough one. It was way, way tough because, again, I just moved into an apartment. I was able to live on my own now. I was making just enough money to pay my bills. Now here I am in an empty apartment with a couch, a broken coffee table, and a bed because I couldn't drive up here and get things out of storage. So it was a tough comeback. But so again, went to war. When I was paralyzed in that situation, I knew this was my opportunity for what I've always wanted. And that was spiritual ascension, enlightenment. I used to think, man, I wish I had been in the Vietnam era, went to war, suffered what those guys suffered. Because some came back and some just unleashed themselves. They had no fear of life, people, whatever. Well, I had my opportunity. I knew this was going to be a part of my spiritual ascension process because I could do what they said 95% of the people would never be able to do. With these injuries, this is your life. I was going to prove them wrong, and then I was going to tell the world about it. This is the power of the Christ consciousness. So, of course, we come back. And by the way, has anybody seen the Patriot Street Fighter Harley Davidson now today? Right? When I got that bike, my friends went crazy. My friend John said, are you out of your effing mind? I said, we've established that. He said, what, he goes, haven't you learned anything? I said, you're damn right I have. He said, what have you learned? I said, what I've learned is I'm impossible to kill. That's what I've learned. So it all begins with what you think your purpose is here. I've known for most of my life what my purpose is, because I laid awake in bed at night since I was a young adult suffering for humanity, kind of like the Green Mile character. All these things happening around the world to people. And how is this possible? This is not what God intended. We're not supposed to go these trials and tribulations because it's good for me. I'm not supposed to be poor, broke, and ashamed because it's good for me. That's what they sold you on. That's what the satanic order, who has captured the religious order, has convinced you. You're not here to be anything but a being of light to spread that all over the world. Now, I tried to do that in a general sense, but nobody listened to me until I blew a gasket. When they deployed Antifa and BLM and were burning the country down, and police commissioners, mayors, governors, even people in D.C. were letting it happen, that's when I blew a gasket. That's when I started a radio show, The Tipping Point, Revolution Radio. It was going to be about spiritual ascension, human consciousness. 5 minutes into it, it turned into this high-octane, full-throttle truth hammer calling George H.W. Bush a sadistic, torturous pedophile, child trafficker, drug runner, leader of the Fourth Reich Nazi. And I thought after that first show, they're going to kick me off. They loved it. And I said, but I don't want to be this guy. I said it the next week. I was ready to go with my spiritual message. High-octane, full-throttle truth scream. Every scumbag I could pick out. And you know what? I couldn't stop myself. Month after month, I'm like, I guess this is what it's going to be. Scott McKay, who my mother would be ashamed to hear speak publicly now, he's on the bench. Until this thing comes down, you're going to get 100% Patriot Street Fighter. It isn't going to stop until these people are dead and in boxes in the ground, and the child satanic trapped and abuse of children ends. That is the end of this message. We have a responsibility to save these kids. These elite powers in D.C. state governments, district attorneys, police officers, all the people that we look to for authority and respect in this world, these people are involved in this nightmare. And I decided, look, they already got the general. He was the first casualty in my war I thought he might be. And they made sure he didn't come out of that hospital. And I'm not done with them. They've heard me say to the whole nation, Mount Nittany Hospital at Penn State, when I'm done with this war, don't think you're going to escape this, because I am coming. These criminals are not going to be allowed to get away with it. Donald Trump, and people wonder about, hey, when's this going to get done? It's just, I want this thing to be done. As Sheila Holm taught me, this is not about getting it done, it's about getting it right. Do you think Donald Trump would walk into this position and put his family at the most amazing risk anybody has in world history? To not know what they're doing, right? Everybody gets impatient. You know what they're waiting for? The same thing God's waiting for, you. For you to unleash your own personal power, get in this fight this war, and we finally started putting together an initiative we're amassing now. How many of you heard about Operation Tomahawk? We put Operation Tomahawk in motion with a partner company who's been around for 35 years doing billions. You know what they said? What we're seeing from Operation Tomahawk is unprecedented. Why? Because I'm showing people this is a way everybody can get into the fight. Stop buying these poisons from these chemical companies that they convince you is okay to clean your floor with, as our Q military intelligence operation told us. Chemicals, baby on the floor, hands in mouth, that's the start when they start poisoning us. We just can't believe that there are people that would kill us this way. That's what they're doing. We are going to shift the buying power of millions of people away from these criminal companies and these big box retailers that they forced us into while they crushed all of our friends' businesses around the country over this COVID nonsense. This is now we moved forward, lateral from information warfare. Patriot Street Fighter is now also an economic warfare machine. The same weapons they've used on us our entire lives, we're going after their blood supply. We're going to kill their cash flow. We're going to choke these people out because we're going to align ourselves with Patriot companies. And when this thing is done 3 years later, I want to see 10 million people we've amassed in this Patriot Street Fighter Consumer Network, by the way, which I'm funding, the tech platform, the cost of it, the people to run it, to give all of this to we the people so they can be part of the revenue stream, what's coming from this. I'm giving it all away, and it's costing me more money to do it because I want people to understand benevolence in this world again. We are our brother's keeper. We cannot look around anymore and see people struggling, working their butts off, suffering, getting nowhere. And that's what I'm teaching my entire team in the culture. You help people. God's universe is you give, you give, you give, you give. And you're going to have to hide because you can't run away from what comes at you. You're going to have blessings and you're going to have good graces come at you like you can't possibly imagine. And it's what happened since we started this operation at Patriot Street Fighter. It's about turning everything, number one, into a battle plan to attack these criminal powers and trying to help people see what their spiritual ascension is about, unleash themselves. Once we collectively unleash ourselves together, there is no power on this planet that is a match for we the people, and that's you. Anyways, thank you very much. It's great to be here.